Hello. Remember that one of our main goals is to use sentential logic to evaluate arguments that are presented in English. But the tools of sentential logic only work on SL sentences. Therefore, to evaluate an argument such as Al is Swedish, therefore, either Al is Swedish or Beth is Norwegian, we must first try to represent what it says in terms of SL sentences. This process is sometimes called translation, given that we're going from one language, English in this case, to another. Taylor doesn't like this term because he finds important disanalogies between it and the process of translating between two natural languages, like English and French. He proposes the term transcription, which also has its disadvantages, it seems to me. It is also called symbolization, since we are rendering the contents of English sentences in the symbolic format of the formal language SL. I'm fine with any of those terms, and after you gain some practice with the process involved, you'll be in a position to judge which of these terms, if any, is preferable to the others. Okay, when we do symbolization, we're using the resources of SL to try to capture an important part of the meaning of English sentences. In particular, that part of the meaning that plays a role in helping determine whether an argument is valid or not. Also, remember that while SL is free from ambiguity, it is really impoverished in terms of what it can express. It is blind to the connotations of sentences, or to what they can be used to suggest, or about how they can be interpreted differently in different contexts. The only thing that SL cares about, the only thing it can see, so to speak, is whether a sentence is true or false. That's all. So, the most we can ask from an SL symbolization is that the symbolizing SL sentence and our symbolized English sentence are true or false in exactly the same situations. That is, the conditions under which the English sentence we are symbolizing is true must be the same as the conditions under which the SL sentence that symbolizes it is true. This is a very important constraint, and in fact, it is so important that we're going to give it a name: the same truth condition constraint. Thus, suppose that S is Al is Swedish and N is Beth is Norwegian. Then Al is Swedish and Beth is Norwegian is represented as S ampersand N. We can see that the English sentence Al is Swedish and Beth is Norwegian and the SL sentence S ampersand N are true and false in exactly the same situations. Both are true whenever Al is indeed Swedish and Beth is indeed Norwegian. Both would be false if at least one of their conjuncts is false. Say if Al were Finnish or if Beth were Danish or both. So S ampersand N is a correct symbolization of our original English sentence, since both are true in the same situations. So this is going to be the main constraint on our symbolizations. On the other hand, if I try to symbolize the same English sentence with the SL sentence, say SVN, that would be a mistake, since they are not true in the same set of situations. For example, if Al is Swedish but Beth is not Norwegian, then Al is Swedish and Beth is Norwegian would be false, but SVN would be true. Hence, the same truth condition constraint would be unmet, and the symbolization fails. Now, let's do a review of the SL connectives to see how they match up with English connective. Okay, let's start with the tilde. The tilde represents all ways of explicitly denying a statement. So all of the following can be represented as tilde A. 1 is not the case that Al smokes. 2, Al does not smoke. 3, Al doesn't smoke. So that's pretty straightforward. Now let's discuss the ampersand. What kinds of statements can be represented by the ampersand? The evaluation rule for this symbol gives us the key. Remember that the ampersand joins two sentences, yielding a sentence of the form X ampersand Y, such that this sentence is true whenever X is true and Y is true, false otherwise. Therefore, an English sentence can be symbolized by the ampersand if it can be interpreted as first being composed at some level of two or more sentences, called conjuncts, and 2, being such that the whole is true when both of the component statements are true, false otherwise. The English connective that most obviously fits the bill is and. And in fact, the ampersand connective is modeled after it. However, there are other connectives that also satisfy the true criteria that we just mentioned, such as but, though, although, yet, whereas, and others. In consequence, all of the following sentences are translated A ampersand tilde B. Al smokes, but Beth doesn't. Although Al smokes, Beth doesn't. Al smokes, though Beth doesn't. As far as sentential logic is concerned, all of these sentences are synonymous with Al smokes and Beth doesn't smoke. What we mean is that but, although, and though are truth functionally equivalent to and. They satisfy the same truth function. True when both conjuncts are true, false otherwise. However, it's clear that there are other ways in which they are not equivalent. For instance, but also communicates some sort of contrast between both conjuncts. Consider these two sentences. Al is a philosophy major, but he isn't a jerk. Al is a philosophy major, and he isn't a jerk. Sentence B simply reports the facts stated in each conjunct. However, sentence A conveys two additional things. It implicitly conveys the expectation that philosophy majors tend to be jerks, and announces that Al, in spite of being a philosophy major, is not a jerk. But SL is blind to this additional dimension of meaning, to all these implicit conveyings and winks to the listener, and so on. As far as SL can see, and, but, although, etc. are the same thing, since they are truth functionally identical. They are all conjunctions expressed by the ampersand symbol. However, and has some complexities of its own. In English, uses of and frequently convey something extra beyond its truth function. For instance, compare these two sentences. A, they got married and had a child. B, they had a child and got married. Truth functionally, these sentences are equivalent. They are both true whenever both conjuncts are true. However, each statement seems to suggest a different sequence of events. A conveys that they first got married and then they had the child, whereas B suggests the opposite temporal order. However, this is something that the speaker fills in, so to speak, and is not necessarily part of the meaning of and. After all, someone could say they got married and had a child, but not in that order, without contradicting themselves. Likewise, compare A, Al slapped his boss and got fired, and B, Al got fired and slapped his boss. If we hear A, we tend to assume that Al got fired because he slapped his boss, whereas if we hear B, we may think that Al slapped his boss in a fit of rage due to his having been fired. So, conjunctions are sometimes used to express causality. But again, this is because we as hearers tend to enrich the meaning of what we hear, and it does not entail that and introduces causality as part of its meaning. There are other English constructions that can be understood as sentential conjunctions, and so can be expressed with the ampersand. Take, for instance, relative clauses. A sentence like, Al is a philosophy major who doesn't smoke, is simply understood as the conjunction of Al is a philosophy major and Al doesn't smoke. And so it's represented as P ampersand, not S. Similarly, Al, who is a philosophy major, doesn't smoke, has a slightly different syntax, but don't let that fool you. It's also represented as P ampersand tilde S. Okay, conjunction and parallel construction. Remember that, according to the formation rule we introduced in a previous video, the ampersand symbol in SL joins sentences. So it's a sentential connective because it operates on sentences. However, in English, and sometimes conjoins noun phrases or verb phrases, as opposed to complete sentences, as when we say, Al and Beth smoke. Here, and is not joining two sentences, but two nouns or two noun phrases, namely Al and Beth. However, sentence 9 is simply equivalent to Al smokes and Beth smokes. And so both sentences are symbolized in the same way, A ampersand B. 9, you could say, is simply a collapse version of 9a. In 9, we're getting rid of one of the occurrences of the verb phrase. The same happens with a sentence like 10, in which the conjunction occurs in a predicate. Al cooks and smokes. This is simply the same as Al cooks and Al smokes. And so both sentences are symbolized as C ampersand A. In 9 and 10, intuitively, two facts are being communicated, such as the fact that Al cooks and the separate fact that Al smokes, or the fact that Al cooks together again with the fact that Al smokes. It's just that in those sentences, and conjoins phrases that are smaller than a whole clause. So both 9 and 10 are examples of what we call parallel construction, in which, as it were, two clauses are collapsed into one. However, when symbolizing into SL, we must exercise judgment, as some sentences that superficially resemble 9 and 10 are not actual examples of parallel construction. Example: Al and Beth are getting married. Or 12. Al, Beth, Carol, and Dave surrounded the tree. In the most common interpretation, 11 is not synonymous with 13, namely, Al is getting married and Beth is getting married. An utterance of 11 most likely won't convey that Al and Beth are each individually and separately getting married to different people, for instance. Rather, the speaker is saying that Al and Beth are getting married to each other. Likewise, 12 is not equivalent to Al surrounded the tree and Beth surrounded the tree and Carol surrounded the tree and Dave surrounded the tree. That is, 12 is not a collapsed version of 14. Rather, we're saying that the group comprised of Al, Beth, Carol, and Dave has managed to surround the tree, not that each of the individuals has separately managed to do so. So what this means is that 11 or 12 are not examples of sentential conjunction, and so are not to be represented with the ampersand, since the ampersand is only used to join whole statements. Okay, conjunction and negation. As we know, conjunction and negation can occur together in a single sentence. They combine in different sorts of ways, which correspond to different patterns in English. Take, for instance, the expression not both, as it occurs in "It is not the case that both Al and Beth smoke," or "Al and Beth don't both smoke." We interpret not both as the negation of a conjunction, with the following pattern. So here the tilde is the main operator. In consequence, we represent both 14 and 15 as tilde A ampersand B. What we are doing is that we take the conjunction, both Al and Beth smoke, that which is A ampersand B, and we prefix it with a negation to yield our result. It is not the case that both Al and Beth smoke, or Al and Beth don't smoke. It would be the same here. So English sentences of the form not A and B are symbolized by SL sentence of the form tilde over a conjunction, right? Where a tilde applies to a whole conjunction. Again, the parentheses are crucial. If we drop the parentheses, we end up with something like this. And unlike in our previous sentences, here the main connective is the conjunction, since the negation is only applying to the left conjunct. So what this sentence would say in English is something like, Al doesn't smoke and Beth smokes. Or Al doesn't smoke, but Beth does. Okay, let's do an exercise to test our knowledge. Using the following abbreviations symbolize each sentence. I'll let you pause the video so you can work on this. Give yourself as long as you need. Okay, sentence 1 is simply symbolized as A ampersand B. So it is just the conjunction of Al has sweet moves, which corresponds to A, and Boris has sweet moves, which corresponds to B. Sentence 2 is a sentence of the not both type. It is basically the negation of the sentence Boris and Al both have sweet moves. Boris and Al both have sweet moves is represented as B ampersand A. And when we negate the whole sentence, we end up with tilde over B ampersand A. So this is how we symbolize 2. Now to sentence 3. When we are symbolizing a sentence, the first thing we have to consider is, what kind of sentence is this? Is it a conjunction, a disjunction, a negation? Here we can see that the connective joining the two main parts of the sentence is although. And if you remember, we take although to be a conjunction, and so we represent it with the ampersand. So let's place the ampersand firmly in the middle. Okay? So this sentence is a conjunction, but which are the conjuncts? Well, the left conjunct is Delia isn't tearing down the house, which is simply the negation of Delia is tearing down the house. So we symbolize it as tilde D. The other conjunct is Boris has sweet moves, which is just B. So the whole sentence is tilde D ampersand B. Let's go to sentence 4. It's clear that the whole sentence is a negation. It is a negation of the sentence that follows the word that. That is, it is a denial of Emily and Fred are both tearing down the house. This last sentence is just a conjunction of E and F, and so it is represented as E ampersand F. Then, once we negate it, we get tilde E ampersand F. Sentence 5 contains both negation and conjunction, but the main connective here is and. Thus, it is mainly a conjunction. So we write an ampersand. The left conjunct is the negation of the sentence, Boris has sweet moves. So it is tilde B. To the right of and, we have neither does Carl, which, given what comes before the and, obviously means that Carl doesn't have sweet moves. So we symbolize it as tilde C. In consequence, the whole sentence is written as tilde B ampersand tilde C. Not B and not C. Now let's discuss the V. The V is used to represent sentences that contain or the compound expression either or. So both of these sentences, Al smokes or Beth smokes, either Al smokes or Beth does, would be represented in the same way as AVB. In English, we also have combinations of negation and disjunction that are quite typical, such as neither nor. Here we interpret the neither nor construction as the negation of a disjunction. So a sentence like neither Al nor Beth smoke is actually the negation of either Al or Beth smoke. This last sentence is symbolized as A, V, B. So we render our sentence 19 by placing a negation in front of the whole sentence. So the symbolization of 19 is tilde over A, V, B. Notice that we could also have represented this by using negation and conjunction. So saying that neither Al nor Beth smoke is the same as saying that Al doesn't smoke and Beth doesn't smoke. You can see then that tilde over AVB and tilde A ampersand tilde B have exactly the same truth table, which means that they are true in exactly the same circumstances. So this is also an acceptable translation of sentence 19. It's just that the one involving negation and disjunction is more standard. Okay, let's test what we just learned with some exercises. We'll use the same abbreviations as before. When doing these, I recommend that you start by finding the main connective of the sentence you're working on. Is it a conjunction, a disjunction, a negation? From there, focus on determining the components. If the sentence is a conjunction, work on locating the conjuncts. If it is a negation, find the sentence that's being denied, and so on. Again, pause the video and take all the time you need, and then come back to check your answers. All done? Okay. One is a straightforward either-or construction, and so it is represented as a simple disjunction, B or C, or BVC. Two is also a disjunction, since the main connective is or. However, this time the left disjunct is a negation, so the symbolization is not D or B. 3 is a neither nor sentence, which has B and C as components. Remember that we symbolize neither nor sentences as negations of disjunctions. So our final representation is not over B or C. Though remember that we could have gone with not B and not C. Example 4 is a negation, and its main operator in English is it's not the case, which is a negation. So what's being denied? What is being denied is the sentence, neither Boris nor Al has sweet moves, which itself has a negative component. But this subsentence is of the same form as example 3, so it is symbolized at not BVA. So since we know that this is the expression that is being negated, Then, to represent the whole sentence, we simply put a tilde in front, and we end with not, B or A. This is, of course, truth conditionally equivalent to B or A, and so this last symbolization would also be correct. However, the one we propose has the advantage that it reflects the syntax of the original sentence. Sentence 5 contains the word and the construction either or. So, which one is the main connective, the conjunction or the disjunction? As you can see, you can only parse the sentence if you assume that and is the main connective. So, what are the conjuncts? The left conjunct is simply be, and the right conjunct is a disjunction, namely either Emily or Fred is tearing down the house, represented as EVF. So the whole sentence ends up being B and E or F. Example 6 is also a conjunction with a compound right conjunct. So we can start by building the conjunction frame here. The difference with 5 is that now the right conjunct is a neither nor construction, which we represent as the negation of a disjunction, involving the sentence letters E and F. So the final symbolization is A and, not E or F. Sentence 7 also contains a combination of connectives. Notice, however, that it has a comma that tells us where the main break in the sentence lies. So this sentence has two parts, before the comma and after the comma. So the first component is neither Delia nor Fred is tearing down the house. And the second component is Emily is, which obviously means Emily is tearing down the house. But what kind of components are they? The clue comes from the occurrence of but immediately after the comma, and which functions as the main connective. If you remember, for the purposes of sentential logic, the word but represents a conjunction, so the whole sentence is a conjunction. Its left conjunct is a neither nor clause involving the letters D and F, so it is not D or F, and the right conjunct is simply E, so the whole sentence is rendered as not D or F and E. Sentence 8 contains two occurrences of or, so we know it must be a disjunction of some sort. The overall frame for the sentence seems to be provided by either or else, where the first gap is occupied by the left disjunct and the second one by the right disjunct. So the left disjunct is simply E. The right disjunct is itself a disjunction involving the letters F and D. So the whole sentence is represented as E or F or D. So far, we have been going in the direction of English to sentential logic. However, we can also go in the opposite direction. Here's another exercise to see if you can do it. So, use the following abbreviations as a guide and write for each of these SL sentence an idiomatic English sentence equivalent. Again, take your time. Okay, hold on. An idiomatic English equivalent of sentence 1 would be both Al and Bill speak Mongolian. If instead you write Al speaks Mongolian and Bill speaks Mongolian, that's correct, but it doesn't sound very natural. Number 2 is a symbolization of either Al or Bill speaks Akkadian. A component by component translation of 3 would be Al speaks Akkadian and Bill doesn't speak Akkadian, but that sounds a bit awkward. A more natural translation of 3 would be Al speaks Akkadian, but Bill doesn't. The main operator in sentence 4 is the tilde, so it is a negation. A negation of what? Well, it is a negation of C ampersand D, which is Al and Bill both speak Akkadian. When you deny that, you end up with Al and Bill don't both speak Akkadian. Sentence 5 is a denial of either Al or Bill speaks Akkadian, so in the end it is neither Al nor Bill speaks Akkadian. It is useful to compare 4 with 5 in order to see the difference that results from switching a V for an ampersand. Negation over conjunction expresses not both, whereas negation over disjunction expresses neither nor. Example 6 is a conjunction. The left conjunct is itself a conjunction. Bill speaks Mongolian and Al doesn't. The right conjunct is Al is backpacking in Mongolia this year. So, one way this sentence could be translated is Bill speaks Mongolian and Al doesn't, but Al is backpacking in Mongolia this year. Sentence 7 could be Bill is visiting friends in Mesopotamia this year, but he doesn't speak Akkadian. Okay, this is all for this video. Bye.